Hey guys, welcome back. This channel is dedicated to all things personal finance related, helping you earn more, spend less, and invest the difference. Now today we're going to be talking about what is, for some people, a little bit of a complicated or abstract concept. We're going to be talking about what is cryptocurrency, what is Bitcoin. But to understand what Bitcoin is, we first have to understand why it was created in the first place. Bitcoin is a completely decentralized and completely digital form of currency. And the reason it exists is in response to the financial crisis of 2008. Back in 2008, people got fed up with governments manipulating their money. Now, when we talk about money, we're usually referring to something like this. This is an American $20 bill. This is issued by the American government. The American government is the one that dictates how much of this stuff is printed and how it's regulated. It controls all aspects of its currency. Now, other governments have their own currency. The Canadian government has their own Canadian dollars. The Swiss government has the francs, and the Mexican government has the pesos. But they're all issued and regulated by their own governments. And this can be a problem when governments don't regulate things very well. You see, governments can simply print more of these at any point that they want. And supply and demand says that as the supply of these dollars increases by the government just printing them and willing them into existence, the demand is going to go down. It's going to devalue each one of these existing dollars. And this can lead to inflation, and even worse, hyperinflation, which happened in countries like Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe had some financial problems, and they just started printing more and more and more of their Zimbabwean dollars. And it got so bad that hyperinflation ensued, and the value of their dollars just plummeted, where now they were printing out literally trillion-dollar bills, but because their dollar was so essentially worthless, even $1 trillion wasn't worth very much money. It just didn't have any value. And this can be a problem because if you were someone living in Zimbabwe and you worked your entire life to become essentially a millionaire, and then all of a sudden the government printed a bunch of money where even $1 trillion wasn't very much, then you essentially worked your entire life for nothing, because now you're not a millionaire anymore, you're essentially broke. And currency values can be manipulated by countries relative to the value of neighboring countries' money supply. And this can affect the import and exports and be very beneficial to some countries, which in turn hurts other countries. So people were essentially fed up with governments manipulating their currency supply. They didn't want any one particular agency to be able to have the power to say what was going on with their money. Instead, they wanted a decentralized network. That way, nobody had control over it. And furthermore, physical dollar bills like this just aren't very practical in a digital age. If you try to send this $20 to a friend living up in Canada, it doesn't really work very well because Canada does not use American dollars. You need to convert it into Canadian currency. And the banking system is very outdated and very slow. So if you've ever tried to send a wire, if you've tried to send a wire transfer some money to somebody, especially living in a different country, it can take multiple days or weeks for that system to process. First, they have to trade the value itself, and they also have to convert it from American dollars into Canadian dollars or whatever it is that they're doing. So it's a very slow process. But what if there was a way where no single person had control over the money supply, and it was a universally accepted form of currency? That way, people down in Mexico would value this just as much as people in America. That way you could send money internationally at the click of a button. So that's why cryptocurrency and Bitcoin was invented in the first place. Bitcoin is just a form of cryptocurrency. It was realistically the first major one that was created, and so since it was the first, it tends to be very, very popular. Now, Bitcoin is a form of money, but it is not a physical asset that you can touch and hold and actually give to somebody else. Bitcoin is completely digital. It exists only as zeros and ones inside of a computer system. And you might think that that's a little bit weird in order to have a purely digital form of money. But is it really that weird? I mean, let's be real. When you're going and trying to buy some stuff at a store and you get up to the checkout line, you're probably not handing the person at the cash register a bunch of this stuff. Instead, you're probably giving that person one of these, a credit or debit card. Now, a debit card is essentially just a bunch of zeros and ones stored in a computer system somewhere, just like a cryptocurrency is. So how does this process exactly work? Alright guys, so with a debit card as a normal transaction, if I were to go to a store and I wanted to buy $25 worth of stuff, I'd go up to the cash register, I'd give the guy my debit card, and he'd swipe my debit card. And that's going to immediately send out an electronic signal to the bank, and they're basically asking, hey, this guy's trying to buy some stuff, does he have $25 in his account so that he can actually buy this stuff? And then the bank's going to look through their ledger, realistically their computer database, and they're going to look and see what my account balance is. And if I have at least 25 bucks, then they're going to give the store the thumbs up. They're going to say that this is okay. And then that is the signal that yes, this transaction can proceed. The clerk is going to give me my stuff and I walk out the store and the transaction is complete. And then as soon as the transaction completes, then obviously the bank is going to update their ledger system. So they are going to subtract $25 from me, which is going to leave me a balance of $75. And then they are going to give the store $25. And so that is how the payment transfer system operates. The store asks if I have enough money, the bank says yes, and that concludes the transaction, and then the bank updates everything in their ledger, their database. But that poses a little bit of a problem because remember, with cryptocurrency, we wanted everything to be decentralized. We didn't want to need to rely on any one particular government or any one particular bank. So in this case, both me and the store, we were ultimately asking the bank, how much money did I have and would this transaction actually work? And 99.99% of the time, it's not a big deal because the bank does what they're supposed to do. But if you remember back with your world history, back to the Great Depression, there was a run on the banks, and banks just stopped giving out the money. Even though it belonged to you, banks wouldn't give it to you. So with Bitcoin, we want to decentralize everything. We want to be able to get rid of this bank entirely. We just want to do away with it altogether. But then if we don't have the bank, how are we going to verify this ledger? How are we going to determine whether or not I have $25 in order to give that store, and how does the store actually get that $25 then? Well, if it were up to me, I would just maintain this ledger. I would update everything, and of course I would cheat horribly, and I would give myself a bajillion dollars, and I would be the richest man in the world. Just like if you've ever played Monopoly, you know that whoever the banker is, they're gonna cheat. Same thing applies here. If you give me control over the money supply, I'm going to cheat. It is what it is. So obviously you don't want me in charge of the money supply because I'm going to cheat. But I also don't want you in charge of the money for the exact same reason, because you're going to cheat and you're going to give yourself a bajillion dollars. So if you can't trust me and I can't trust you, then how can we figure out a system where people are going to actually report the accurate amount of money that they have? So I don't trust you and you don't trust me, but we might trust everybody. So instead of having one main ledger, what if we had hundreds or thousands of people and they were all maintaining their own version of this ledger? What would happen then? So in this case, each and every one of these people on the network is updating a balance sheet of everybody's money, not just your own, everybody's money. So now we're not asking one government or one bank how much money somebody has. We are literally asking everybody how much money you have. So when an announcement goes out and says, hey, does Ben have $25? Then everybody on the network is going to look at their individual ledger. And they're going to say, yep, Ben has $100. And so as a collective, they are all going to agree that Ben has $100 and this transaction can proceed. And then each individual person is going to update their own individual ledger, just like the bank did. They're going to subtract $25 from me, and they're going to give $25 to the store. That way, everybody's ledger remains the same. So in that regards, the network operates sort of like a hive mind. It comes to an overall consensus of who owns what and returns the results. And that's really beneficial because it removes the incentive or even the ability to cheat. Because let's just say that this guy right here, he tried to cheat the system and he tried to give himself $1 million. So he updates his individual ledger saying, I have $1 million. But it doesn't match with everybody else. Literally nobody else on the network thinks that he has $1 million. The overall consensus is, dude, you're lying. You don't have $1 million. And so his account, his balance of that $1 million that he tried to put in his ledger is going to be reset back to what the collective hive mind says that it should be. So in that regards, it's really impossible to cheat the system and just give yourself a bunch of extra money, because you would basically have to hack literally everybody else on the network at the same time. That way everybody's ledger said that you had this $1 million. That's just not going to happen. So then how does actually sending money with Bitcoin work? Because it's going to be a little bit different, because obviously we're not talking about dollars anymore. All right? So in this case, how do I go about sending Bitcoin? So in order to initiate a transaction, I am going to announce to everybody on the network that I need to send some Bitcoin. So it's going to go something like this. Send 2 Bitcoin from my account. Let's just say my account is ABC account, from ABC to XYZ. Maybe XYZ was the account for the store that I'm trying to purchase stuff from. So I just make an announcement with 3 bits of information. Send however much amount of Bitcoin I want to send from my account to this other account. And then everybody on the network gets this piece of information, and they all update their individual ledgers. So they're going to subtract 2 Bitcoin from me, from the XYZ account. I'm sorry, from ABC, which is me. And they are going to give that to the XYZ account. That's going to be the account in this case that the store had that I'm trying to buy this stuff from. So everybody is going to update their individual ledger and subtract 2 Bitcoin from the ABC account and add 2 Bitcoin to the XYZ account. And then once everybody has updated their individual ledger, now everybody is once again in agreement that this transaction was legitimate, that I now have 2 less and XYZ now has 2 more. I'm sorry, that should be a BC. Now everybody is still in agreement, but that can be a little bit of a problem, because if all it took was 2 different account numbers, the sending and receiving account and the amount of money, then how do you know that this request actually came from me? How do you know that's just not some random person trying to steal all of my Bitcoin and drain my account? How do you know that's not some random person just saying, hey, send 1,000 Bitcoin from this account that I don't own and send it to me, to one that I do own? So in order to make sure that it was actually me that initiated this withdrawal or this transfer request, is a computer science terminology referred to as cryptography, hence cryptocurrency. Now what happens is your Bitcoin is stored in an account, kind of like your checking account or savings account at the bank. It's just a holder, and it's typically referred to as your digital wallet. So this is going to be where all of your Bitcoin is stored inside your digital wallet. Now each digital wallet comes with two keys. It's going to have a private key and a public key. This private key is known only to me. Nobody else has access to it. Nobody can duplicate or replicate my private key. It is 100% unique to this wallet and is only known by the owner of that wallet. The other one, the public key, is known to literally everybody on the network. So here's how this works. Your private key is able to digitally stamp or digitally sign bits of data. So essentially what happens is, when a request comes out like this, send 2 Bitcoin from ABC to XYZ, it is going to get stamped by your private key. All right? So now it just got digitally stamped. And what happens then is, when this message goes out to the network and everybody is trying to determine whether or not this is a legitimate request, every single person on the network is going to use the public key that is supposedly associated with this ABC account, because that's who's requesting this transfer. Everybody is going to go to the ABC's public key and is going to try to use that public key on this message that has been digitally stamped or digitally signed by this private key. So if the public key works on this message, then that means that it was signed by the correct private key, that I actually initiated the request and it's not some hacker or scammer trying to empty out my Bitcoin wallet. If the public key works, the request was legitimate. If the public key does not work, then that means that this was a fraudulent request and nobody on the network will actually process this. Nobody will update their ledger if it's fraudulent. But if it worked, if the public key works, then it's a legitimate request and everybody will start this process of sending 2 Bitcoin from ABC over to XYZ. Now this ledger is a running tally. It is started and recorded literally every single Bitcoin transaction that has ever occurred. We can go back and look from the first transaction in Bitcoin's history all the way up until now. We can show the flow of Bitcoins. Now there's a lot of different transactions, so eventually this particular ledger page is going to get full. And so we need another ledger after that. And then once that one's full, we need another block of information. We need another page in the ledger process until that one gets full. And what happens is this process goes on and on and on. Each page or each individual block of information gets recorded and is subsequent to the previous one. So what happens after a while is this starts to look like a chain, and that's why it's referred to as the blockchain technology. You have a bunch of blocks of data that are chained to one another in chronological order. And that's how this process continually updates itself. Now, these people are verifying transactions all the time. There is Bitcoin being transferred every second of the day almost. Bitcoin is very popular. So they're verifying all of this stuff, but how do we know when the transaction actually goes through? Well, the transaction actually occurs when one of these blocks is full and gets completed and gets recorded on the blockchain. Now, how that process happens is each one of these people is trying to solve with their computer a mathematical problem. And once somebody figures out the solution to that mathematical problem, it completes one section of the blockchain. Now, statistically, somebody is supposed to be able to solve that problem once every 10 minutes. So theoretically, once every 10 minutes, a block in the blockchain gets completed, and that's when the transaction formally occurs and the money gets taken out of my account and gets sent to the XYZ account. So unlike a regular bank, if you've ever tried to send a wire transfer and it's taken days or weeks, especially if you're trying to send money internationally, that whole pending deposit, when you get paid from your job, you get a pending deposit notification where it kind of just sits in limbo for a couple of days at your bank. Well, unlike that, this process is going to be able to move money every 10 minutes. So much, much faster than the days or weeks that it takes a bank and their ACH, their wire transfers, to actually get validated and go through. Now you might be saying, well, that's great, the process works and all, I guess, but what's the incentive for each of these people to maintain and update a ledger on their computer system all the time? Why are they doing it? Are they updating the ledger out of the goodness of their heart? Well, no. You see, Bitcoin has a built-in reward system to reward people for maintaining this ledger and continually updating things so that the Bitcoin network, the blockchain, can actually function. So the way it works is, remember I was saying that each one of these people, their computers, are trying to solve a mathematical problem. And when that problem does get solved, that's what completes a section of the blockchain. Well, whoever the lucky person is, let's just say it's this guy, so that person that solved it is going to get rewarded with some Bitcoin. Now, the amount of Bitcoin that they get rewarded with is going to vary. It started off, when Bitcoin was first introduced, it started off as a 50 Bitcoin reward for solving one of these sections in this blockchain. And then roughly every 4 years, that reward gets cut in half. So what started off as 50 Bitcoin reward went down to 25 Bitcoins, down to 12.5 Bitcoins, and now the current reward as of 2020 is 6.25 Bitcoins for whoever is lucky enough to complete one of these blockchain segments. Now, the price of Bitcoin varies depending on supply and demand, but currently, as of today, the price of Bitcoin is roughly $11,500 per Bitcoin. So if you get 6.25 of these Bitcoins, that's roughly $75,000 worth of Bitcoin that's given to whoever solves this mathematical problem. Now, these 6.25 coins are simply poofed into existence. They are created out of thin air. And you might be saying, well, if these coins are created out of thin air, then what's the point? Well, remember when I said that the amount of coins given as a reward is constantly decreasing roughly every 4 years? That means that realistically there's a finite number of coins that will ever exist, because as time goes on, less and less new coins will be created until eventually it gets to the point where no more coins will ever be created. That won't happen for a while. It's estimated that roughly around the year 2140 is when the last Bitcoin will ever be created. And at that point, there will be a grand total of about 21 million Bitcoins in circulation. So even though these coins do sort of spontaneously generate themselves when somebody solves one of these equations, there is still a finite number of Bitcoins that will ever exist. And since there is a finite number of coins that will or can exist, that means that there will not or cannot be this runaway inflation with more and more Bitcoins just being created indefinitely. And in addition to the 6.25 coins that this person is going to get that get magically generated out of thin air, they also get paid in tips, in partial Bitcoins based on every single transaction that was verified during that block. So the theory is that eventually, even though people won't be getting any base coins, when the 6.25 or this 50 Bitcoin or whatever for solving this, eventually that number itself is going to drop down to zero. But you will always get this tip money based on the fees, or whatever you want to call it, for each individual transaction that was verified. And the thought process is that eventually there will just simply be enough transactions on the network that it will still be worthwhile for people to maintain these ledgers, to continually update all of this stuff just by the fees alone. So every single Bitcoin that currently exists or will ever exist was generated as a result of somebody maintaining the network. Now, you might know these people that are maintaining the network by a different terminology. They're commonly referred to as miners because they are mining for that algorithmic, that mathematical solution to the equation in order to solve one of these blocks of data so that they can get rewarded with this Bitcoin payout. So all of these people that are maintaining the ledgers are referred to as miners. So in a nutshell, that is Bitcoin and cryptocurrency as a whole. Now, whether or not cryptocurrency is the way forward, if we are eventually going to get rid of all fiat money, or if this is simply a passing fad, that is obviously yet to be seen. So obviously invest at your own risk, just like with any other type of investment. If you found this video useful, be sure to subscribe, leave a comment down below. I love hearing from you guys. I have new content every day. And as always, I'll see you all again next time. Thanks.